Hi, it's great to have you back again with us on the Vanessa Eriksson podcast. I'm Vanessa, and I'm here to bring you meaningful conversations with leaders and influencers on data, AI, innovation, and leadership. Today, my guest is Jonas Blomqvist, the head of data and analytics at SAS Scandinavian Airlines. With over 2 decades of experience, Jonas has built a career at the intersection of data, technology, and business strategy. He's worked across a wide range of industries, mainly focusing on data warehousing, business intelligence, and analytics. His journey has taken him through various roles and technologies, always with a focus on turning data into real business value. For the past 5 years, he has been leading the modernization of Scandinavian Airlines' data platforms and analytical capabilities. Known for his ability to build high-performing teams and drive cross-functional collaboration, Jonas brings a valuable blend of technical depth and visionary leadership. Let's welcome him and welcome all of you back again. Great to have you here. Let's get started. So without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Jonas. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very nice to be here as well.
Yeah, and SAS Scandinavian Airlines, 5 years. That's a long time.
Yeah, 5 or almost, or even 6 right now, I believe. I think I joined in April 19, so
Yeah.
it's a long time,
Yeah,
but some strange times as well.
strange times. Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audiences?
Yeah, Jonas Blomqvist, working as head of analytics and data at Scandinavian Airlines. Been doing that for over 6 years now. So I'm currently responsible for, all the capabilities and platforms and center of excellence, working with data analytics. But not only that, I'm also responsible for enterprise integration. I have some DevOps team working with building gateways, operational data stores, supporting a wide variety of different solutions and stakeholders within SAS.
Yeah.
So it's that's who I am.
Yeah.
Or what I do, at least.
True.
Yeah.
But you've been working with data for over 20 years.
Yeah,
What a journey, right? Because,
Yeah.
The people like us who've been working with data forever, we've made the whole transition, to where AI is today. But can you share a moment that challenged you and, ended up being the key turning point for how you lead today?
Yeah, it's one thing I can think of, and maybe not the biggest turning point, but one thing that made me maybe change the way I lead and how I work with the team and the department and everything is because I have a background as from like 15 years of consulting, and then you were used to be the expert. You had the deep technical skills, and then you combine that with the people skills and the business acumen, and you that was a good way to get bigger roles and like project manager or architect and consultant management roles, etc. But I always had like a big foot within tech and being an expert. But I remember when I moved to ICA and joined them as a line manager, and then we used a completely different tech stack.
Yeah.
So then I was forced to, start looking more on the strategic technical questions. I had to rely on the team, I had to rely on my experts, and I had to take a step back and more spending time on other questions. Of course, still using my domain knowledge within data and analytics, but step away from tech. So that's certainly, helped me and in the way I lead and govern my department still today.
Yeah. But was that, would you say that was the moments where you stepped out of your comfort zone, or is there another moment that you think, oh, this really challenged me?
Work-wise, I've always, I have never taken like big steps in either direction. I have decided and, taken decisions to shift technology, shift roles and try new things. But one thing that keeps me, challenge me still and maybe keeps me away from the comfort zone is more these kind of situations, speaking at conferences and participate in things like this, because that keeps you, of course, you need to keep up to market trends, you need to think a lot about, what you have done lately, what you have achieved as a team, as a department, and then package that in a way as well and try to present that and give that story to others. So that for sure keeps me a bit on the toes and out of the comfort zone.
Yeah. But I don't think you need to worry because, I look at you and you've got all this big bag of knowledge and what you're doing. So you got this, Jonas. You got this.
But then, of course, you have bits and pieces and assignments and things that have pushed you out of the comfort zone as well, of course. But
true. Yeah. What's the one thing you wish more up and coming data professionals understood about real leadership, especially in this field?
Yeah, maybe one thing I can think of, is sometimes you get too much focus on technology. And trends and new tools and services. And you can buy things and gain value and build value out of that. And to some extent, that's of course true that you need some basic capabilities. But I think one thing is actually to focus on how we support stakeholders and people in the organization, with insight models and data and try to create like real value out of that. And because the people I work with and supported many times in different ways, they don't really care if we use the latest tech stack or the latest technology and exactly how we do it. They are interested in that it's done and delivered and on time and on budget, etc. So that's one thing that you can, I think, need to understand. Yeah,
but I agree with you because I think sometimes you can get so focused on, feeling stress about we got to do this or the latest technologies, as you say, and it's not about the technology, it's about the value that you bring to the business. Jonas, what's one important thing that leaders should know about creating a data-driven organization? Because you've definitely done this several times. Yeah. What's the one thing you would say is really the key here for data-driven?
Yeah, and be data-driven and one thing regarding to leadership and what is important to understand for everyone working within a company and working with people like us is, understand the complexity that comes with working with data, because it's not only that you need to be a skilled developer, you need to know tech and be able to do all of that stuff that is very much needed to understand, cloud native technology and everything that is ongoing. But you also need to understand, your business model, your processes, ways of working, and all the systems involved. So that's something that takes time. Yeah. So I think if you look at it from a leadership perspective, if you want to build a data-driven organization and to be able to support a data-driven organization, from my perspective, that means that I need to be very good in building teams, secure that we keep people, so we can secure stability over time, and that we can build knowledge and the deep knowledge about the company over time. Yeah. So it doesn't just help to bring the best tech people, the best developers, because if you don't understand how everything is connected, between the different big processes and the different business areas within an organization, then it's very tricky to gain any insights or build any complex data models or solutions on top of that. Yeah. So that's one important aspect.
I think I totally agree with you. Sorry, Jonas, because I think that I think helping them to understand the correlations between the different systems also helps them in motivating them to see the bigger picture.
Yeah. And that's the thing that takes time, and you need to be a bit. You need to be you need to let it take time,
Yeah.
because you when you're new somewhere, and we've done that ourselves, you start, you think you understand everything, or because you have understood one problem, one question, one area, but then you're in another meeting, and then so this is how things are
True.
connected. So then you add some more complexity, and in an airline, where that's why I love working within this industry. It's such a complex business model.
Yeah.
With everything we do within the international scope, and planning a network, selling tickets, staff, aircrafts. It's extremely complex. And
like I said at the start, I don't envy the role that you have. But
I
admire you.
Yeah, you always, and I still learn new things more or less every week. So that's really fun.
So SAS, it's Scandinavian Airlines. It's old.
Yep.
It probably has a lot of legacies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when do you think? How do you know it's the right time to go? Sell your business case to the CFO or the finance and say, either this has to be retired, or when do you know it's the right time?
Yeah, but we touched upon it a bit, I believe. But in some cases, it's pretty obvious when you lack fundamental basic capabilities that are needed. If you don't have, like in our case, when we decided to go for modernization of our data platforms, if we were lacking good support for self-service, real-time data solutions, lake storage, etc., then it's okay, we can't really build on what we have. We can't optimize what we have, so we need to take a bigger step, right? Then it's easy. But to be honest, as we talked about, the tech is not, the solution to problems most of the time. So in many other cases, you can decide maybe to just invest more in what you have, right?
Yeah.
Because you can do a lot with existing technology in many cases if you just spend the effort needed when it comes to development and governance of what you already have in place.
Yeah.
So it's not always easy, but in I think maybe when thinking about it, in practice, in reality, most of the times you need to do both.
Yeah.
In parallel, I think. Yeah. So.
I think especially for old companies, old organizations like SAS.
Yeah. So optimize, short term, because you need to support and you need to answer the questions and provide the data needed. So you need to do that. So then you might have to optimize what you already have in place.
Yes.
But then make sure that at the same time that you can continue with a more long-term transformation.
True. True. Agree.
Yeah.
There's a big push for data literacy.
Yep.
How do you think you can support organizations or SAS without overwhelming the people? Because I can imagine that there's what do they come with now?
Yeah. Yeah, we started a journey, with a more bigger data governance approach and a data catalog. But then the pandemic hit us, so we had to take a step back, and now we have started to slowly discuss it again. But I think you can do things meanwhile as well, of course, with the proper data catalog and providing the right definitions and the right KPIs and explaining the data to your users and to business, of course. But I think one important thing here is that maybe I'm a bit old school, but you should provide, and focus on what is needed for a specific job role or for a specific department. Like in our case, when we look at our data, we can have number of passengers on a flight, and we have several different definitions depending on who you are and how you're supposed to use the data, right? So some people only want to look at the revenue packs, paying customers. In other parts of the organization, you want all of the passengers because you look at it from another perspective.
Yeah.
So it all depends because, we have passive crew, we have standby, we have infants. It all depends on how you're supposed to use the data. So maybe not overwhelming people with all the definitions and all the data you have, but the data that you need. So maybe start treating it a bit more like we do with our customers and work more with the personalization of data and data definitions and build these data products and explain the data in a good way. for you, so
yeah.
it becomes interesting for you as an individual.
How interesting! I never considered that infants would fall in a separate category, because of course they are also people. I mean, you would count the seat, but maybe no.
Yeah, but they travel with your.
Yeah, and you not always
in the
have a
knee.
little. Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Didn't think about that before. The airline industry, you know, they have very thin margins. We all know that. Complex operations. Just hearing that from you.
Yep.
Yeah. How has data helped SAS to become more responsive or agile in this kind of an environment?
No, but one recent example that has actually we have communicated and marketed that quite a lot. You know, that we have become one of the world's leading airlines when it comes to punctuality.
Nice.
Yeah, so we were the top leading airline 2 consecutive months, or maybe even 3 months, and we are in the top worldwide as well. And that's a project that has been running on time performance from a business perspective, of course, making sure that, you know, with the help of data, that you go through the morning readiness processes and procedures, and make sure that 7 days per week you look at what went wrong, how can we optimize, did we follow our internal processes. So we have supported this, you know, with a lot of real-time data and also historical data, but a lot of data, you know, so we can make sure that we follow the processes, that we are on time in each and every step.
Yeah.
So we depart on time the first flights during the morning period. Because in an airline, if you're late the first flight,
everything.
That will ripple out throughout the day. So, but this is more like not that super complex thing, but just making sure that you gather the data, that you expose the data, and that you use the data for everyday work to optimize what you are already doing. So it's a good example, and then of course a lot of other factors as well involved. But it's a good way to support such an important part of the company, and because if we are punctual and we have good completion rate, you can see that in the P&L statement as well, of course.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna be out there and ask. So what is the biggest challenge then when you're doing this? Is it always? I mean, because clearly you guys have mastered something to be one of the top airlines with punctuality. What's the challenge?
Yeah, the challenge from that process perspective, or from our perspective, we if we stick to that, because that's where I can talk a bit more freely, of course. The other stuff related to this is owned and by other peoples within our company, of course. But from our perspective, you know, the challenge is because we have a lot of legacy systems as you managed, and we are dependent on global distribution systems like Amadeus and other providers. So finding the data and you know, getting the data in real time and exposing the data, that's a challenge. And we also touched upon, you know, definitions and data quality and so combining the data and making use of the data from that perspective is not always super easy.
I'm thinking you've got flight operations, you've got crew planning. Where has data, in your opinion, made the biggest impact on, you know, decision making at SAS?
Tricky question, but I would still say that, you know, at least where we support, we use data everywhere, and we provide a lot of the enterprise data, and we know about more or less all the data available and how it's being used. But still, I think we're like strongest within the commercial areas, like revenue management and marketing, and because, you know, from a revenue management perspective, that has a huge impact, of course, on revenue, that you optimize how we you know, based on demand, the forecasts, external factors, our historical data, different trends and forecast predictions, to optimize our revenue based on the customers that we have available. Yeah, that's very data driven and an important area within an airline.
Yeah, and in my humble opinion, I think the CFO is the one who's always interested in the data. Doesn't matter the industry.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you would agree to that.
Yeah, and in our case, it's the revenue management, chief of revenue management, and the CFO and other people as well, of course.
Yes.
So
yes.
very interesting.
You're bringing data together from areas like revenue and flight operations and crew planning, which is no small feature to be done, you know. What have you learned about breaking silos? Because I think every organization, and especially like SAS, the ones that have been around for a long time, they clearly have silos built in. How do you overcome this and, you know, get them to collaborate with and share the data and talk to one another, because that needs to be done?
Yeah, that's an important thing for sure. So what we try, you know, internal networking and collaboration is extremely important, you know, if you want to break down the data silos. And in our case, you know, we are the like essential team belonging to digital and IT. So we as I mentioned, we support everyone with data and solutions. So we try to take that responsibility to connect the business users throughout different forums and collaboration, center of excellence set up, and so we can like, and also not only that, but that's, you know, good to connect people and that we know where to find the data and who to talk to if we don't know the answer, etc., etc. But then from our perspective, as with the responsibility and accountability we have, is that we also need to build like data models. We can cross-combine data between the different silos.
Yeah.
Because then we can, you know, enrich and give one business area or department even more insights and knowledge about what they are doing if we enrich that data with data from other processes, right?
Yes.
So we can always enrich and enhance, but then we need to build things in that way as well. So that comes to us to make sure that data can be combined, and so you can gain those bigger insights out of the data. And that drives collaboration, and that drives us away from the data silo thinking and perspective as well.
AI is really great in theory.
Yep.
But airlines run in real time, right? Where do you see the biggest potential for AI to make a difference, a real difference in your work?
AI is always just the definition of AI, what we include and what we mean. It differs depending on who you talk to sometimes. But if we include like machine learning, advanced analytics, and broaden the term a bit, or maybe that's what you include in the term, I'm not sure. But we have already done quite a lot of things and impact when it comes to like chatbots and classification models, segmentation models, predictions, and optimization as well within, you know, both customer service, the commercial areas we talked about, revenue management, but also airline operations. So we have done quite a lot already. I'm not responsible for the AI aspect, but it's my closest colleague that I work with. So we work together quite a lot. So I'm involved in quite a lot of these different topics and projects as well, of course. But if we look into the future and what could be very interesting, if you look at it from an airline perspective, is to use AI, you know, to build like voice agents to support, you know, not only pre-travel processes and you as a customer, but also, you know, the post-travel aspect of things as well. So building AI agents and voice agents, that is not that far away. And some have already started to do that. So I think that's something that is extremely interesting going forward.
You know, Jonas, when I called you to be on my podcast, that was the day that unfortunately Air India had this big crash, and that was a really sad moment for all of us. I think it was most people who are everybody travels, so that was a really hard one. But I'm thinking there's so much unpredictability in travel. There's the weather, there's delays, there's strikes. I know that you said you're not in charge of, you're not responsible for AI, and it's your colleague. But can AI? Do you think, just as a matter of speaking, do you think AI could really help the airlines to get ahead of that?
Yeah, sure. And if you look at it, of course we can't control everything, and we have a lot of uncertainties, but everyone. That's common for most businesses, right?
True that.
But we can, when already are using, our actual data with external data to, build a solid network. And that's the first step if you want to have a stable operation, is to build a solid network and take everything into consideration. And that, quite a lot based on historical data as well,
True.
where you build up congestions and where you have problems from different perspective.
Yeah.
So that's something that AI can help us with as well, to optimize, how we plan and how we do the long-term planning. So we have a robust network in place. But then we also collaborate with like Eurocontrol that handles air traffic within Europe, and they have solutions and provide data on things that can be used as well to a certain extent. But if you look at it from a slightly bigger perspective and from an AI perspective, and things that being discussed, of course, if we want to support the daily operation and try to act on what is happening right here, right now, then you need the real-time data available, but you also need the data so you can build those kind of that digital twin and set up that digital twin to support that we take the right decision at the right time throughout the day of operation as well. So I think that has a huge potential to even further reduce cost for irregularities, and because that's a big thing in our industry. When we have problems and we have delays and we have a cancellation, it's extremely costly, because we have the requirements from European Union and others to compensate our customer and to make sure that they are rerouted and et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a few things I can think of.
I'm thinking that for your colleague working with AI, I think you would be the real key one, because also then to make sure that there would be no biases, especially if you're the guy supporting the AI with all the data.
Yep.
To make sure that there would be no biases as well in your data. So, what a fun task ahead.
Yep.
If we're looking into the future, there is a pressure on the airlines with their old systems to modernize. We touched on it a little while ago, but how do you still, decide which system stays and what just is worth replacing and what just needs some perhaps little rethinking?
Yeah, and as an airline, some systems and dependencies, we have to live with when it comes to distribution and other things. Of course, everything is being modernized, and that's a big topic on its own. But what we as a department try to do is more to just live with what we have, and then try to think, okay, how can we build more modern real-time data solutions on top of what we are having, so we can support more customer friendly or customer interfaces, like the SAS app or the web with data, and we can support like proper customer communication if we have changes when it comes to delays, cancellations, or gate changes. So we try to build modern real-time data solutions on top of the legacy, to be able to support more modern implementation and use cases. So that's our current approach. And if you think about it, then the next time you fly with us, if you use the SAS app, you can see like ongoing onboarding, completion, and you get notifications.
I did that actually.
And you're asked to check in, and all of these cool stuff and cool solutions that our up team is building is in many cases based on our real-time data solutions on top of legacy. So we combine like booking data, with the flight operational data, and then we make that available in real time. We send events, we expose APIs, so we can act on things in like instantly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Since I traveled SAS, I can verify that actually happened. A lot of text messages from them.
Yeah, maybe sometimes too much, but that's always things you can tweak and improve and optimize what you have, right? Yeah.
True. You've recently been through a major cloud transformation, and what advice would you give other industries who are looking to modernize without, bringing everything to a complete halt in operations?
Yeah. One thing, if you can manage to do it, because for us that has been a very important factor, and that is to be as autonomous as possible. It's not always easy, but if you have the people and you have the funding and then you can manage both the legacy platforms and build up the new cloud capabilities within the same department and using the people who knows both.
Yeah.
Which makes things a lot easier, because that has helped us, to balance, both requirements and resource utilization, and with very little sub-optimization. As we talked about earlier, we know when we have to optimize short term and when we can spend time on transforming long term, and we do that in close collaboration with business. So we being autonomous, and that's the key, I think, because if you're dependent on too much on different projects and initiatives that you're not in control of, it can be very difficult to run a transformation like this over time.
Yeah. But then, so if you had no budget, if you had no limits, no time, no tech, what's an AI-driven solution that you'd be most excited to bring to life?
Yeah, from my perspective, and they call me the data guy, and we touched upon it, but building that full-blown digital twin is something that would be extremely fun, because then we need to have the data available from so many different places, and a lot of external data and data that we don't have today as well. Because if we could build that and replicate everything that is going on our main hubs like Arlanda, Copenhagen and Oslo, everything from the customer flow, aircraft movements, catering, cleaning, de-icing, maintenance, and everything else that is ongoing on an airport, then that could be a big help to optimize processes and to make sure that you handle irregularities in the best possible way as well, to predict if we do this, what will happen then. So you can build proper optimization on top of your real data. That would be extremely cool.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But the airlines and sustainability don't go hand in hand, right? So as sustainability gets more and more focus, what role do you think data and analytics could play in reducing their footprint?
Yeah, what we do today, amongst different things, is that we use the data to nudge customers to pay for biofuel, and so we use better fuel in our aircraft that is more sustainable. We also use data to optimize things as tail assignment, so you use the engines and aircraft that are most efficient on the longer trips. So you optimize the tails. Tail is like in a specific aircraft. So you can optimize that also to reduce emission and fuel consumption. We already today, reduce food waste as an example, because that's waste in another way and not really sustainable. So we predict, in-flight food consumption on each flight, and make sure that we don't pick too much fresh food that we have to throw away, etc., etc. Small things, but all the small things ends up in being important over time, right?
True.
But the most important aspect here, I believe, from an bigger airline perspective, is to make sure that you have a modern and fuel-efficient fleet. And that is something that SAS has invested quite a lot in. So we have modern aircrafts and modern engines that are really efficient from a fuel consumption perspective.
It's really nice. I mean, as a Swede and using SAS, it makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonas.
Yeah,
It's
thank
been
you.
so much fun
Yeah.
to hear all that you have to say. Very, very educational, challenging, but it must be fun because otherwise you wouldn't be there for 5 years. No, 6 years.
Yeah, even 6 years. So it's for sure fun and interesting business that we.
Yes,
that we run.
indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening to us. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. Bye for now.